This is Unapologetically Ashley, my podcast discussing topics such as dating, cooking, shopping, budgeting, and more, all with a disability. My goal is to show that, disabled or not, we are all the same. And while I may have a disability, it's not all of who I am. My name is Ashley, I'm 25 years old, and when I was born, the umbilical cord got wrapped around my neck 4 times with a knot, which cut off the oxygen to my brain, leaving me with a bunch of different disabilities, including CVI or cortical visual impairment, as well as right hemiplegia, which is a type of cerebral palsy. Because I have both of these disabilities, oftentimes I can feel like an outsider, even within the disability community, like I'm trapped inside of a box. This can be quite isolating and lonely at times, and I can struggle with my disability. But at the end of the day, I'm just unapologetically Ashley. Hello and welcome into episode 1, Dating with a Disability. In this episode, I'm going to be discussing the struggles of dating both online and in person with a disability. When you have a vision impairment or you're blind, it can be really hard to know first what someone looks like, as well as how old they are, and if you have the same things in common, if they're right for you. It's also really hard to know if they are single or in a relationship, whereas online it is slightly easier. As someone with a vision impairment, I can blow up the person's picture, I can read their description, I can see certain things about them that I find either good or bad. Like, for example, I can make sure I don't date someone who does drugs or smokes or drinks too much or has a child, for example. I can eliminate those variables and I can alter them depending on who I'm attracted to and who I'm looking for. For example, when it comes to physical attraction, I want someone who's taller than me. I want someone who's a bit more physically fit. I want someone who is, not too hairy, for example. I also, when it comes to personality-wise, is a bit more open to things like disability. They may not know a lot about it, but, they're still okay with it. Someone who is really sweet, kind, compassionate, really honest, and, makes me feel safe and happy to be around. Someone who has similar beliefs and interests to me. We have things in common. I think it's really important when you meet someone that you have something in common with them. And I know how the movies make it look like the whole opposites attract, which is definitely a real thing. But what the movies don't tell you is that when it comes to meeting someone in person or even online, you have to make sure that not only do you get along with this person, but if you do have differences, that you challenge each other in a healthy way where they make you feel good and you enjoy their presence even if you don't have everything in common. And for me, I understand that, and I want someone who is both genuine and sweet and kind, but also shares some of my same beliefs and interests, especially when it comes to, what you feel about politics and what you feel about certain topics. You want to make sure that someone shares those similar beliefs, even if it's not exactly the same, like they can still challenge you, but, they still share those opinions and those thoughts that you align with and you agree with. So for me, finding someone to date, it's really important that I find someone who I can trust, who I feel safe with, not feeling pressured to move faster because I'm not ready to do things that other people might be ready for, that I'm not because I haven't had those basic experiences first. I was more okay with doing things that I kind of regret. I tried sexting when I was younger, as well as flirty texting, and I felt uncomfortable doing both. It just wasn't for me. I didn't like it. And I did it because the other person wanted to, and I wanted to make them happy. I wanted to, have those experiences so badly that I was willing to do things I wasn't ready for. Unfortunately, people with disabilities are more taken advantage of, which is a sad truth. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to me. Now, because of my vision impairment, I cannot drive. So it's also very important to me to find someone who can. And I want someone who also can cook, because that's also something I struggle with. They don't have to be great at cooking, they don't have to be amazing at it, but it would be nice to date someone who can cook and who can drive, and it just makes it a bit easier because I live somewhere where I'm able to luckily walk to a lot of places, and so it's easier if I meet someone who lives around the same area or someone who can drive to those places. I could get an Uber or catch a bus somewhere, but it's a bit scarier. I'm going places I don't really know that well, and because of my vision impairment, it just adds another layer of difficulty. I do have to let people know where I am and what's going on so that I feel safe, and it's very important to do that regardless of whether or not you have a disability. But when you do, it just adds another layer on top. As I said, it can make it a bit more challenging. So there are certain things you do need to consider when it comes to dating. And when it comes to having a disability, there's that extra layer on top that you have to consider in terms of safety. For me personally, when it comes to meeting someone, I do want to date someone who I feel safe with and who I enjoy being around, who we have enough in common that we can relate to one another. When it comes to dating someone with a disability, when you yourself have a disability, there can be struggles around that. I'm not opposed to dating someone who also has a disability, but because I can't drive or can't really cook, I don't particularly want to date someone who also has a vision impairment, because it will make it difficult. And while there's nothing wrong with two disabled people dating in a relationship together, it is slightly easier on the disabled person if they're dating someone who either has a disability that's very different from theirs, and it's a bit easier. Like, for example, for me, it would be easier for me to date someone who's in a wheelchair and still has the use of their arms, because that way they can still drive. Things like that are important to me. But at the end of the day, I would prefer to date someone who isn't disabled at all, because although someone who is disabled could relate to me in my struggles, someone who isn't can better help me with my needs. And I know that there are things that able-bodied people kind of can be worried about when it comes to dating a disabled person, like, for example, being a caregiver, having to take care of the person, being both their boyfriend or girlfriend, as well as being their kind of caregiver and protector. And there are some people who just don't want both those roles, and that's very understandable. But as someone with a disability, it's important to me that I have someone in my life who I am in a relationship with that does all the normal relationship things, but also makes me feel safe and also is willing to protect me and make sure that I'm comfortable at all times, make sure that I don't get hurt. Now, because I also have a physical disability, there can be certain environments that are hard for me to be in, both because of my physical disability and my vision impairment. So it's very important for me to make sure that I am around people who know about my disability and are comfortable with it, whether it's driving me to that event or, making sure that I don't get trampled or things like that, like me grabbing their arm. It is a bit of a different experience to someone who is dating a fully sighted person. But at the same time, that person, as you get into that relationship and as you get to know one another, those sort of things don't really matter as much, because at the end of the day, what does matter is your relationship with that person and how you feel about that person. There are a lot of things to keep in mind. There are a lot of variables and a lot of factors that play into dating with a disability that not everybody is okay with, and that's fine. If you don't want to date someone with a disability, that's fine. That's just a preference. Everybody has preferences. Like I said, everybody has a type. Everybody has a person that they're attracted to. But you have to be honest about it. It can be hard when you aren't usually interacting with disabled people and then you meet someone who is, and I understand that. I understand that for a lot of people, in their day-to-day life, they're not really going to interact with a lot of disabled people. And so when it comes to dating a disabled person, they don't really know what to expect or how to go about it. But as someone with a disability, it's important for me to, number one, feel safe in the environment, and number two, to feel like I can trust the person at all times. And so when it comes to me finding that right person for me, as I get older, being someone who is 25 yet hasn't even had my first kiss and isn't really looking to be sexual with anyone, I think that for me personally, obviously I do want kids, I do want to get married, but I'm not looking for a hookup. I would rather get to know you and date you, really date you for a long amount of time where we are in a relationship. I am your girlfriend and we are dating for this amount of time before we start to get physical. And obviously I'm not someone who subscribes to marriage before sex. Like, I have no problem having sex with someone before we're married, but I just need to make sure that I'm comfortable with the person and that I trust them. I want to make sure that I am meeting people who fit that, who also want a relationship, who, are looking for marriage, or who are okay with a long-term relationship and understand that when it comes to me and my needs, being someone with a vision impairment who hasn't had those same experiences and will need to take it a bit slower, I need to make sure that I meet someone who understands that and can go at my pace, because I'm someone who develops feelings quite quickly into a relationship, which is why I like to be very careful in terms of trying my best not to get hurt by doing what I do, which is talking to the person on that specific app, not giving them my phone number, not giving them my socials, just talking to them on that app for a certain amount of time to the point where I feel like, okay, now I can meet up with you and get a gauge for what you're like in person. Even if you meet someone in person, it'll take you a couple of dates to really get a feel for the person and to get comfortable with them, and that's different from someone pretending to want something and then wanting something else, or misleading you or leading you on. I've had a lot of those experiences where I felt like we were getting towards a relationship, but then they just decided that they wanted to be friends and kind of strung me along without being honest with me about what they wanted, which was quite sad and quite unfortunate. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had those experiences. For someone who has a vision impairment like myself, but is also an extrovert, when you interact with people in certain environments like parties, you're able to kind of be a bit more confident, especially if you have a lot of friends, whereas I am not super sociable. I am an introvert. I'm quite closed off. I can be quite insecure or nervous. I can be quite shy around new people, especially when I'm kind of more by myself. And because of that, it can be really hard to put myself out there and meet people. And I know I'm not alone in this, but because I have a disability, because I have a vision impairment as well, it makes it more challenging. Like, I can't really go up to someone and ask them, how old are you? One of my biggest embarrassing stories when it comes to trying to date in person, I went to the movie theaters. I go to the movies a lot, and one time I went into the movie theaters and there was this guy there who I thought was attractive, pretended like I wanted to see a movie and asked, what movies were playing and different things about the theater. I didn't end up asking him how old he was or anything like that, but it was just a good experience for me to have. Unfortunately, I never saw him again. I don't know if, I just went on days he wasn't there, or he just stopped working there, or what happened, but it was still a good experience for me. It allowed me to kind of have that experience that I was lacking, of putting myself out there and just seeing what happens. Again, I don't know how old he was, so maybe he was many years older than me and, thought I was weird. I don't know. But there are a lot of things like that where you just don't know, and as someone with a vision impairment, it is scary. It's scarier for me than it is for someone with no disability or a different disability, because they can still see the person and they can still get a gauge for that person and their behavior. They know kind of what they're wearing, so they might know how to base a question better. Like they'll be able to say, oh, that person's wearing a Disney t-shirt, they must love Disney. Whereas, I might not be able to tell, or, things like that. So there are so many different variables there. And I just want to make sure that when it comes to meeting someone, whether it be online or in person, that I can feel safe, I can feel comfortable, and that it's not too embarrassing or awkward for me or for the person that I'm talking to. But those have just been my experiences dating with a disability. Like I said, there are so many different variables, there are so many different struggles for people like me. And when it comes to dating, whether you have a physical disability or a vision impairment or any other kind of disability, it can be hard to know certain things about a person, and it can be hard to put yourself out there when you have a disability. When you have a disability like a physical disability where you're in a wheelchair, you can see people from further away, you can get a gauge for their reaction to you, you can know how they feel about you being in a wheelchair, whereas when you have a vision impairment like myself, you can't always tell how the person is going to react or how they feel about you. So there are so many insecurities there and so many fears that I myself definitely have, being someone with a vision impairment. There are so many things that I'm afraid of when it comes to dating, both online and in person. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!